Multifamily opens up a wide range of opportunity for wherever you want to take your career path.
This is really, for me, the only industry I know where you can come in with little experience, little education, and work your way up to C-suite status.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Multifamily Mind. My name is Steve Wunsch, and I'm your host. Joined today by a longtime industry friend of mine, Yvette Evans. Yvette is the Vice President of National Sales at Leap, a dynamic leader in the multifamily real estate sector with over 15 years experience in both on-site operations and training, as well as over 5 years experience supporting the industry on the supplier partner side. Her strategic vision and commitment to innovation have positioned Leap as a disruptor in the industry. Yvette leads a team of sales professionals overseeing a nationwide book of business and distribution partners in conventional multifamily, student housing, single family, and build-to-rent verticals. Her influence extends beyond business metrics as she actively promotes diversity, inclusion, and women in leadership roles. I had the privilege of working with Yvette at a couple of different organizations, and that'll probably be part of our conversation today. So, Yvette, welcome to the show. So glad you're here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Shall we tell the audience what we call each other?
Yeah, Lucy, you can go ahead and introduce me properly now.
I'm the Lucy to her Ethel. So, I think everyone in life needs to find that person who is their Lucy or their Ethel, someone that you can bounce ideas off of, touch base with every once in a while, pick right up where you left off. That's one of the great things about multifamily is it's provided me with a really wonderful circle of friends and colleagues and all kinds of good stuff. So glad you're here, Ethel.
Love you, Lucy. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Getting into some trouble.
So one of the things I think is most interesting about you, Yvette, and your experience in the multifamily space is just the idea of your career path. I mean, you've had quite a journey, and it's been through multiple different iterations. Let's talk a little bit about your journey, because what I'm hoping is that our listeners will glean from this how multifamily opens up a wide range of opportunity for wherever you want to take your career path. So you want to kick us off with a little bit of background on your story?
Sure. So like a lot of people in multifamily, I got here by complete accident. It was, as you said, over 15 years ago. And at this point, I don't really remember how many, just once I hit 15, I stopped counting. And at the time I lived in California, Southern California, and I worked for a home builder.
Okay.
And like master planned communities, my job actually, pretty cool job. I named the streets of our communities that we were building. And
I had no idea you did that.
I did. Yeah. I worked for a very eccentric home builder, and all of our communities had to be themed and everything had to pass like a numerology test. So that was my job, is coming up with enough names to fit the theme and making sure they had the right numerological value. So, all that time I spent in school like really paid off there, but I loved that job. It was a lot of fun. And it was also during the housing bubble in, the early 2000s. And I showed up to work one day with chains on the door and lost my job. And,
Okay.
Not a lot of places were hiring for a street namer. So I didn't know what
astrological street namer.
Yeah, my skills didn't really translate. And, I didn't go to college. I didn't have a college degree. If I could go back and change a little bit about my younger days, that might be one of the things. But I was really stressed out about what to do. I was young, didn't really want to move back home with my parents, didn't have anything to fall back on. So this was the days of monster.com. That was where you went to go find a job. And I kind of put my resume to send out to anything with the word like home, house, anything in that real estate-ish world. And I got a job, or I got a call to interview for what was called a housing manager for a low-income senior housing community. Huh. And I went to the interview and I left thinking like, I'm no way qualified to do this job. And they hired me. So that was kind of my first job into property management, was property manager for low income, independent senior living. And I was 25 at the time. So it was a really hard job. I dealt with dementia, with hoarding, got just a ton of experience in housing, but realized, having to do stat checks and finding dead bodies and things at such a young age really kind of took its toll on me. So I decided I didn't want to do that anymore and got a job in student housing. So I went from one extreme to the other. The joke was I still had to teach them all how to write a rent check. No one knew how to write a rent check. So right. They told me if I could handle seniors, I could handle students. And so I did that for a few years as a property manager and loved that job as well. And then I moved to the East Coast and had a really hard time finding a job again, because even though I had managed 2 different properties and 2 different asset types, I didn't have DC experience. And that was really important to people in the DC metro area. So I got desperate and I started at the bottom again, and I went to work as a concierge. And within about 7 months, I was managing the property. I went from concierge to leasing and then back up to property manager. So that was fun too. And honestly, I think it made me a much better property manager, having to start at the bottom. Most people don't start their career as a property manager, and I kind of randomly did. And so I didn't really understand a lot of like the leasing nuances. Plus, I never really did lease. I went from senior housing, low income senior housing, where we had a wait list, to student housing, where we fill up every year. So rightfully, they didn't want to hire me for that job. And I'm glad I started at the bottom again and kind of learned those skills.
There's a lot of value to that, because I always think about keeping yourself relevant and, making sure that you're, what the folks boots on the ground are going through on a daily basis. And there's a lot of managers that maybe they've had a hospitality background or they've had a retail background where they've been, managers in prior companies, and coming into multifamily, it is a different animal for sure. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said for kind of starting from scratch and building your way back up.
I remember when I eventually did get to the corporate level, which we'll get to, that was a lot of times what we would hear from employee surveys was that, it's easy for corporate to push these things down. They've never spent a day in our shoes. And so I felt that it always did help me that I had and really knew the ins and outs of their jobs. And when I moved into a training role, I could speak to exact scenarios that they were dealing with because I dealt with them too.
Yeah, that's key for a training professional for sure. I mean, you may not have a degree, but you've got street credit, which has a lot more value, in my opinion, than somebody coming in the door with a degree that can teach, but doesn't really have the experience to back up what they're teaching. So that's a good recommendation for folks listening. If you're a leasing consultant now and you have a desire to, share your knowledge with other people and maybe move into a training role, one of the biggest recommendations I would make is, really dig in and know your job from A to Z, work your way up through the assistant process, learn how to deal with delinquencies and how to handle irate customers, and, get yourself exposed to all of those different experiences, because then when you do finally step into the teaching arena, you've got the chops to back yourself up.
Yeah. And I think that's really how I was able to prove to the property I was at that I was capable of moving into a higher role. Was I kind of came in and I looked at opportunities, and instead of just sitting around and being like, it would be nice if someone did that, I kind of raised my hand and said, could I do this? We didn't have any kind of concierge training program. And I wrote the manual and kind of rolled it out and trained all of our other concierge in the area. And so, kind of taking control over your own destiny is really important moving forward in multifamily. So, and that kind of brought me to you. So we worked together, and you were my trainer when I was a property manager. And I remember sitting in your classes thinking, that looks like fun. Like, I want to do what Steve doing.
He can do it. Anybody can.
You were with your bow tie and teaching us like all kinds of ways to get personal before you get to business. And that you made such an impression on me sitting in that class that I said, I think that's where I want my career to go. I knew very early on, I did not want to be a regional manager. I did not want to be a VP of any kind of operations. That was not my jam. Sorry to those of you.
No, I'm laughing because you're a VP now.
Not of operations.
I know.
But I had a hard enough time managing my own property. I couldn't imagine dealing with a portfolio of 12.
Yeah, got to give props to those regional managers and how they keep all those plates spinning and employee issues and resident issues. It's a very unique, even like your DNA has to be different to really lock and load in those particular roles for sure, because they're not easy.
No, no, and I'm way too emotional, I think. My skin got really soft over the years. I didn't have the thick skin to have some of these high pressure, high conflict conversations, and so I'm really happy to pass the baton off to those who are more qualified, and also really proud of the people I've seen move into those roles and how well they do, because I know how hard it is.
Yeah.
But I also knew that was not the path for me, not the path I wanted to take. I would say, there's not a lot of support. Maybe there's more now, but when I was growing up in multifamily, that was the path. You went to concierge, leasing consultant, assistant manager, property manager, and then the next step for you was regional. And that was your path. And it was like, how do we get you prepared to become a regional? And I was waving, I don't want to be a regional. What else can I do? I don't want to be a regional. So training was really what I kind of latched onto, and again, struggled to find a job and find someone who would consider me for a trainer, since I didn't have a college degree and I didn't have an education background. And
it's like DC, it's a tough market to be in when you don't have those credentials to back you up, because there's 900 other people wanting the same job and they have them.
Yep, it's so competitive.
Yeah.
But luckily, shout out to Joy Zelaznik at Kettler, who saw something in me and gave me a chance, and I'll always forever be grateful. And I got my first office with a window at corporate, and loved that job so much. Joy really let me kind of own our leasing training and customer service training and all of our soft skill training, because she knew exactly what we were just talking about. I had the street cred to back all that up and could relate to the leasing professionals and managers that were in our training. So I did that for quite a few years and loved every minute of it.
There's a lot to be said for how you really owned your own career pathing. Like, some of the conversations you've said is, this was the direction that this was the path that was predestined before, you came into the picture, and it wasn't the right path for you. And you knew that. And so I think there's a lot to be said for, and even thinking way back to our first episode where Gary Gregory talks about, you own your career path. And if you want that next step, you need to put your hand up and say, what do I need to be exposed to? What do I need to learn? And if you don't want that next step and you want something else, make sure that you're letting your leadership know so that they can help you get the experience, the tools, and the exposure to all the nuances you'll need to have in order to take that next step. So I think there's a great point to be made in that.
Yeah, I was definitely nodding along in that episode, because I was like, yep, I agree. And I also felt like I liked what he said too. And I've come across this a lot with, the people I've worked with, is sometimes you don't want to move up. You're really content in the role you are, but there's a lot of pressure to, well, what's next? What do you want to do next? And sometimes you're like, I'm good here, but you can always be better. Just if you want to stay here, that's fine. Just make sure you're being the best you can be and staying on top of opportunities and learning trends and things like that. So,
I think that traditional career ladder really does a disservice to people, because so oftentimes, and you've seen it as much as I have, Yvette, you'll have somebody who's really great at leasing and they can sell ice to Eskimos and they just love it, and they're hungry for the sale. They love the art of asking for the business, and they do really well. And then the next step is an assistant manager. And we take somebody who's a really great salesperson off the sales floor. We put them in an office and make them call for collections and, manage books and do all that bookkeeping. And I can't tell you how many folks, probably we've lost some really amazing talent because that was just kind of the way things were. I think over the last few years, though, COVID has helped us to step back and really look at how things happen in the world a little bit differently. I listened to a TED Talk, and we'll link to it in the notes for the podcast. It was about squiggly career paths. And just these women in London talking about how, we used to look at resumes like if you didn't have more than 2 years in a role, or if you skipped, if it was too much hopping back and forth, we didn't want to take a chance on you. But they're like, no, they're great to hire because those job hoppers tell you all the things that they loved about the company and why they chose to go there. And then they can tell you all the things that made them decide it wasn't the right fit, whether it be 6 months or a year. And there's a lot to be learned from that kind of squiggly career path. And I just think there's people out there that were automatic tracking systems, applicant tracking systems. They dismiss people because they don't have the right words in their resume. So, we've got all these things in place that are just kind of antiquated.
Yeah. And I know the industry is lost. They leave to go outside of the industry because they feel multifamily is not for them because we don't have a career path for them.
Yeah. Yep.
And that is a shame. So I have seen a lot of change, on coming over to the vendor side and working with clients, and I've seen this conversation shift. I think there's definitely still room to grow. But I also agree with what Gregory said, in that it's not all on, the company to define those career paths. You have to own it too. Yep. And so it's definitely a mutual connection, mutual relationship that requires that.
Hi, folks. I wanted to take a quick 30-second break so that I could say, I hope you're enjoying today's episode, which couldn't be brought to you without being superpowered by Sales Mail. I mean, really, we couldn't produce this content without them. Sales Mail is the easiest and best tool for sending personalized video via email, text, and CRM. So, if you really are enjoying today's episode, it would mean a lot to me if you would visit salesmail.com so you can check out how our solutions might impact your business communications. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn as well. Okay, that's enough. Now back to the conversation. So, interesting thing about you is not only did you take that direction in your career development, but you come in to an organization. So we'll use Leap as the example because that's where you are now. And we'll tell the folks at the end of the broadcast what Leap is all about, because I want to make sure that they know. But you came in and you saw a lot of air. So she's VP of, what's your new title?
VP of National Sales.
VP of National Sales. And yet I think you probably spend more of your day looking at processes and looking at the way you guys are doing things and looking for opportunities to improve. And what's cool about Yvette is she does that on her own. She's she doesn't wait for somebody else to say, we'll fix this later. She starts to fix it now, which I think is really cool. And that's a skill set that I think, there's probably a lot of people in the audience who are of the same ilk, who can walk in and see things and see a different way. How have you been able to kind of navigate in your career to be that voice of change that really kind of pushes the envelope sometimes, maybe even disrupts a little bit, because you see that there are opportunities for change to happen?
Well, it's taken a lot of, I would say, maturity, being able to speak up effectively. And, I think I probably tried to do the same things earlier in my career, and I just didn't go about it the right way.
Okay.
So learning from experience, kind of just growing up as a professional and learning how to manage some of those situations, and also kind of really realizing that my opinion and my experience does matter and can impact this organization. For a long time, I kind of felt like I wasn't qualified to say anything either. Again, it probably goes back to how I started my career, kind of falling into this by chance, doubting my education level. No one wants to hear from me. Like, what do I know? I don't have a business degree and I've only done this for a couple of years. There's a lot of imposter syndrome going on over here.
Yeah.
And it's taken a lot of time to kind of grow up and realize like, no, okay, it's been, as we said, 15 plus years. I can let go of that degree. I've earned my school of hard knock degree over here. And I think it also has to do with the company that you're with. Leap has been very good in allowing me the opportunity to do this stuff. I've worked for other organizations where it was very much noted, stay in your lane. We'll take that feedback and we'll maybe go do something with it or not. Leap has been very like, hey, that sounds really good. Do you want to take that and run with it? And really given me the opportunity to kind of do that. And, that makes you self-motivated when your company values the work that you're doing and appreciates the work that you're doing, makes you want to keep doing it. And so I'd say it's a maturity, experience, and company culture, really like, does your company support that?
So leaders that are out there listening, you really have to be sure that you're cultivating the right kind of environment for folks to be able to do the things that Yvette's been able to do. And I mean, a startup, Leap's not a startup anymore, but it's a pretty small organization, probably less than 50 people. And when we were working there together, it was less than 30 people. Right.
Yeah.
So, you have to be kind of scrappy and you have to kind of be, paving your own way, but to their credit, Rory and Adam and Mike and the leadership at Leap did create that culture where you had a voice. It was respected and valued. Your opinions were considered. Nobody knew all the answers, and we really worked together as a team. I kind of want to backtrack to your conversation where you touched on imposter syndrome, because I know, there's a lot of people listening to this that are in that same boat and hearing those same voices. What are some of the ways or tools or people that you connected with that helped you to kind of keep those voices at bay and continue to push yourself out of your comfort zone?
My therapist, which I laugh, but I mean, mental health is something that I think since COVID too, we've all gotten really serious about. And, that's a big passion project of mine, is removing the stigma around therapy and mental health tools, because, even in my current life, there's people in my life who still view, I can't go to therapy. That means I have a problem. And it doesn't always mean you have a problem. It's, you go to the doctor to get a checkup, check up on your brain and check up on your mental health too.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, really working on it personally. And why do I feel this way? Why, what happened? What trauma in my past made me the way I am, but working through that. And I really can't speak highly enough of it. And I know sometimes people want to keep that out of the workplace as well, but I think, a lot of workplaces have actually gone a long way to promote mental health and give mental health benefits. So, kudos too.
Yep.
And the other thing is connecting with peers, right? Having some good mentors in your corner, having you on my side since, we met when I had one baby. Now I have preteen and a 8 going on 17-year-old. So, you've been in my corner a lot of those years and kind of got to help me grow up. And, when I talk about growing up and maturing and sharpening my professional acumen, I did that by having not necessarily much older, but I did have older and wiser peers in my corner to kind of help guide me. So finding a mentor, we tend to gravitate towards people our own age and our own experiences, but push yourself to find some really experienced people and some, make sure your group of networks and your brain trust is as diverse as the people we serve and the companies that we work for, because that will really go a long way. But I think the biggest nugget that helped me get over imposter syndrome happened through a conversation I had with a pretty executive leader, and I won't name names. And they were new kind of to multifamily, but they were everywhere and involved in all these conversations and had all this great insight. And I asked them, like, do you know all this stuff? Like, you haven't been doing this very long. Like, how did you learn everything about multifamily? I've been doing this for years and I don't know half of what you know. And they looked me square in the eye and said, I'm making it up half the time, learning as I go.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, here's this like super respected, super successful person who is probably feeling the same way I do, just going about it differently. And it's worked out pretty well for them. And I think about that all the time, almost every day. And I've really kind of taken that with me into Leap, but okay, I can learn as I go. And, I've learned that to question things and again, like do it respectfully, do it professionally. But I operated under the assumption for so many years and so many roles that like, well, there must be a good way. There must be a good reason why we're doing it this way, or there must be a good reason why we're not trying this.
Yeah.
I never spoke up. And I started to, as I've grown up and at Leap, especially, I started to really ask those questions and there wasn't a reason why. It was just no one thought of it. I was the first person to suggest it. So, don't be afraid to ask questions and don't be, I don't know if you've seen that. I have young kids, as I've already shared, and I know a lot of people do, but have you seen the movie Luca on Disney?
I have.
So my imposter syndrome, my anxiety is my Bruno. And I'm always telling my imposter, Silencio, Bruno, like, just go away, get off my shoulder. I tell it to be quiet all the time and take some chances. And you'd be surprised. Like, there's not a reason why, or people do want to hear, and I know you mentioned too that Leap makes it very easy because we're a small company. And I agree that does make it easier, right? It's easier to hear everyone's voice when there's only 30 of us. But it doesn't mean that you can't do that at a big organization. And I think that also has really led to some of my growth and success as I've had regional managers while I was a property manager who knew I didn't want to become a regional manager, but there were still some regional manager tasks that I would be good at. I loved variance reporting and I know. I'm
Hello.
It takes one to know one. But yeah, I loved doing that stuff. So they would, still give some of that responsibility to me, let me learn some new skills, which I moved off of the operations side and over into the vendor side. And those skills have helped me in my new job, So you can still give people opportunity to take on more, hear their suggestions, even if they don't want to move into that bigger job or, it doesn't, you don't have to work at a small company to make sure your voice is heard.
Right. Agreed 100%. One thing I really appreciate about you, Yvette, is the fact that you don't let a challenge defeat you. You've got a really strong consternation and you're pretty determined to do things that need to be done. But like, for example, when you got to Leap, had you been a Salesforce user before?
Oh, very minimally. And they're, I don't know if my friends from a past life are going to listen to this. They'll know how much I hated Salesforce. And I didn't know Salesforce very well, but again,
you got there and there were things that you knew needed to be improved in your process. And you jumped in with both feet and found resources that could help you learn how to use that program, whether it was reaching out to them directly or finding a mentor in your network who was familiar with how that platform works. And you were able to, by doing so, really reinvent your process for how you guys were managing your leads and taking care of business in Salesforce. And I just think that that's a really great example of, don't let the fact that you don't have the experience hold you back from trying. Don't let the fact that you don't have a degree hold you back from trying. So many times we hear those voices in our head and we're just like,
yeah,
well, they won't want that for me. They'll want somebody who's, better versed in that than I am. No, stop listening to those voices, because look at what's happened for you in your career. And now you're VP of National Sales for a really amazing organization that's doing some really amazing and wonderful things in the multifamily space. So kudos to you.
Thank you. I mean, appreciate that.
You bet. Well, we're getting ready to kind of wind things down, but before we do that, I do want you to take a split second to talk a little bit about Leap, because it's a product I believe in, and I think that there are folks in our audience who might be interested in learning just a little bit more about what you do. And we'll make sure that we provide some links to your website so that folks can do their own research. But just give us a 30-second elevator speech about Leap and what you guys are doing in the multifamily space.
Yeah, I don't think there's a better way to kind of explain what we do, especially to multifamily people, than by talking about our mission statement, our vision is to make renting easier and more accessible and affordable to everyone.
Yep.
So we reduce the barriers to entry by providing rent guarantee services. So people, on the student side, international students who don't have a guarantor, people who their parents aren't qualified to be their guarantor, we provide assistance for those folks so that they can get into student housing and don't let that be an impact to their college career.
Yep.
And then we do that also through deposit replacement. So I'm sure many people already know what a deposit replacement program is. We replace the upfront move-in cost with a monthly fee through an embedded product. So it's completely embedded in the leasing workflow to help renters, again, reduce that barrier for entry, make it more affordable. Sometimes it's, they want one school district, but they don't qualify, or they have to pay a much higher deposit than this other school district. And we don't want the cost to be the reason why you're making choices about your kid's school. Or, it's either I can buy a couch or I can pay the deposit. You need somewhere to sit. Go buy the couch. We'll help you on the deposit side. So we really are on a mission to make renting more affordable, easier, and accessible, which I think is really important and a topic that everyone's talking about right now too. So, and just, to toot our own horn a little bit more, we provide other ways as well. We just awarded $50,000 in scholarship money to students that live in LEAP communities through an essay program that I'm really, really proud of. We put our money where our mouth is, and we want to help make sure that students are on a path to good financial knowledge. We provide education and resources to help them after college as well.
That's awesome. Very cool work. So with this Multifamily Mind podcast, we ask all of our guests the same final question. And so you are to be no exception. And so the question is, what is your most audacious take on multifamily? And we define the word audacious as extremely bold or daring, recklessly brave, fearless. So from your perspective, I mean, you've sat on both sides of the table, operator and supplier partner. What is, from your perspective, the most audacious take that you can tell us about multifamily?
I mean, such a jarring question.
I've given you plenty of time to think about it.
I know it's hard. Tying it back, I think, to my career is that, this is really, for me, the only industry I know where you can come in with little experience, little education, and work your way up to C-suite status. And I think that we need to do more of promoting that. So thank you for letting me kind of tell my story and my journey. I know we got hung up a lot on the on-site and didn't move too much over into the operations, but or into the vendor supplier side. But there's so much room for growth in this industry, and we really need to do a better job at letting people at the lower level know that they can take their career in so many different ways, and provide some more opportunities to really show what this industry can look like 10, 15, 20 years from now for an employee. And
to follow your lead, that's pretty audacious, because you were pretty fearless in your pursuit of what you wanted for yourself. And so that's an audacious thing as well. So I love it. We'll make sure that folks can find you on LinkedIn. I would encourage folks to connect with you. Take a look at her job history on LinkedIn, and you're going to see this really cool mixed story of all these different roles she's played, from on-site leasing all the way up to, managing a national sales team as a vice president of sales for a really cool prop tech company. So thanks for joining us today, Yvette. I've enjoyed being able to share my Ethel with the world.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks,
And
Lucy.
this has been,
I said, thanks, Lucy.
You're welcome. And this is Steve Wunsch. This has been the Multifamily Mind, superpowered by SalesMail, and we will see you next time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Multifamily Mind podcast, brought to you by SalesMail, the easiest way to send personalized video via email, text, and CRM. To learn more, go to salesmail.com. And remember, always be audacious. Until next time, I'm Steve Wunsch. Have a great week.